Hey, this is Talking on the Block here, and we're keeping it on the block. Now, there's a lot of resurfacing articles and conversations about what happened in 2022 during Biden administration. And it also, let me put it like this, it basically began during the ending of the Trump administration into the beginning of Biden administration, and it happened to go through it, but then something else major occurred that pushed it in the background. And you're probably saying, Talking on the Block, what are you talking about? The Rona. As in a Black American community, we call the Rona virus because we weren't allowed to say what it exactly was. There was such a tight grip on how we spoke, the words that we used, that basically sanctioned us. That's an unfortunate thing. There are three major people within this scenario that blame can be placed on. One, everybody loves to hate, is President Trump. He was in the beginning of it at the end of his term, and he was responsible for the rapid vaccines. And you had Johnson & Johnson and two other companies, vaccine companies, that were producing all of these vaccines. And it got so crazy that Johnson & Johnson was sanctioned. Was it Murdoch? Whatever it was sanctioned. And when I say sanctioned, I mean something went wrong with it. Then you have President Joe Biden in the beginning of his first term, or the beginning of his presidency, through to 2023 and to 2024, to where the whole United States was locked down. The Rona virus was was very rampant within the United States. Whether if it were, and then the disinformation and the misinformation was so thick, and as people start questioning, then social media, to where your platforms were taken down, videos or comments were removed, and it was, as some people would say, very fascist. Now, the center of all this stuff is Anthony Fauci. And right now, he is in a lot of trouble because he's in contempt of Congress, because he's not giving up his diaries of the Rona part of his diaries. And he was basically pardoned by Joe Biden, but Anthony Fauci wasn't charged with anything. So it's quite interesting how President Biden pardoned him for things that he wasn't charged with. So that's something to really look at, and I find it rather interesting. However, it's cited and it has been discussed, and journalists or reporters have brought this information out, that Anthony Fauci, or Ouchie Fauci, had a lot to do with the Wuhandala, that lab in the Red Dragon country. He had a lot to do with it. Now, within all of this, and this information coming out, back then, President Biden allowed opened up the doors and allowed people to come through. And what I believe is that when Biden allowed all these illegal immigrants to come in and then made them all refugees because he was cited to win another term. And if he did, then everyone who he allowed in would become citizens. And there's a lot to that. There's a lot to that right there. And to have permanent Democratic voters. So there's a lot to that. So my question is very simple. Who's responsible for this? Now, we already know that Fauci's taken a fall, and as he should. We could either look at President Trump or President Biden. And before we make that determination, I'm going to have a series of newspaper articles or titles and go through it and choose for yourself. And second of all, please like, subscribe, and leave comments and help me grow. I'm trying to get to 1,000 followers. So help me get there.